Okay, so completely dried overnight, really happy with how it's looking, and definitely looks like the tumbler. It will spring to life, I think, when we get the actual windows blacked out. I've popped it together just to have a look, really. Still all a loose fit, so we just pop the front wheels off. Okay, the rears I've put in, but as you say, they are a loose fit. They're a little bit snug to get in and out, so I don't want to play with those too much. Generally happy with the wheels. The tyres, I must admit, sort of growing on me now, and I think by the time we sort of get in there, give them a little bit of grime and a bit of, wash, I think they'll be absolutely fine. So first up, what we want to do is give this a dry brush. The idea with dry brushing is to basically highlight the highlights. Okay, so anything that's got an edge, going to take it slightly back a bit. Now, obviously, golden rule with dry brushing is patience and time. Far too often I see people and they'll come in, load up the brush, they'll go flying in, and before you know it, they've overdone it, okay? Or you're in that situation where it's really dark in some places, light in others, and everything else. Two things that help with it. One, don't go in there with a massive brush. I used to believe that if you had a big brush, you could go in absolutely everywhere. The trouble is, if you go in with too big a brush, you just basically overcoat everything, and you can't do different changes and tones, and you have to think about your weathering as well slightly, as in where's it going to be rubbed down, where are you going to take more off. Obviously with this one we're going to take more off the sides and more off like the upper corners, but obviously flat areas on the top, they're not going to get any really wear and tear. It's just going to be a light issue. So for this, what we're going to actually use is a little bit of dark sea grey. So we're going to use a sort of a medium grey. You don't want to go in there too dark, because obviously you're going to change the look of it. Obviously we're going to come in as well with washes and things like that, which will darken it down. The idea of coming in with a grey, it's just something in between. It's not like a white, so obviously it's going to be putting light edges on everything as if light's reflecting off of it, but it'll be somewhere in between the two. So usual thing, and we've covered it a lot before, but we'll have a quick recap. Basically what I like to do is I'll soak the brush in the pot, then scritch it off the side, okay? Then come onto your brush, get rid of the bits, okay? Onto your paper, and squash it all down. The idea with this is the bristles, especially if you're like me and I don't use brush conditioners and all things like that, it just goes in thinners, they tend to dry out and go a bit crispy. By soaking it in the paint like this and loading up the brush, it absorbs everything, they get nice and soft, they're going to give you a better look. If they're dry and everything, all it's going to do is scratch, okay, and you're going to get very much a scratchy look. So you want the bristles to be nice and conditioned. Now, if you have got some very nice posh brushes, then you'll be absolutely fine, but from our point of view, we don't, so we're doing it this way. The other thing as well is squash down the top of the things around the sides, because what happens is you can get more paint stuck up in those areas, and when you start your dry brushing, you suddenly find out you've got a lot for no reason, and it's like, well, where did that come from? Normally at the top, when you're starting to scrub down a bit more as your paint's drying off. Now, get it all off, okay? When I start, I'll usually go somewhere, and on here's brilliant, you can go off down the bottom and have a test go and literally see what's happening. Nothing really coming off, brilliant, that's what we want. So then you can actually start working your brush all the way around. Now the idea is you shouldn't see anything off the bat, but when you angle it, you're going to start to see different colors coming in, all right? So you're not using like a silver, which is going to be really strong and things like that. And obviously on here, because it's on the color that it's on, which is obviously the sand, and then you've got the darker color, it's just that thing of you're just trying to cause it to have an effect rather than anything else, all right? So then we can start just generally working it around everywhere, okay? But make sure you get it all off. You're better to take your time and spend an extra half hour going around it all and getting it correct than it would be to sort of go in there too soon and ended up putting big scuffs on. So the other thing as well, we're gonna work this in a twofold manner. We're going to be coming in with quite heavy weathering down the sides around the front, where it would collect it obviously up around this back area. So that's where you want to start your dry brushing, because that's when you've got lots on your brush, okay? And when you're coming in like this, you can empty it off, and it doesn't matter if you go a little bit over the top or anything else like that, because that's just part of all the weathering and the scuffing. Once you've got a little bit off and you're running out, then go off and do somewhere else. So from our point of view, we're going to go around and do the roof. So we can put some mild weathering just across these tops of the roof. And I'm basically out now, so I'm rotating the brush just so we get it in there. Now I don't know how well you're actually going to be able to see this in there because the colour's off, but hopefully you can see you get a little bit of griming just happening down in here and all these areas, and it's starting to come to life. All right, but as I said, far too often I see people and they're like, right, okay, I'm doing a bit of dry brushing, they're like so wet on the brush that when they come in it's sort of like this, and they're like, you know, right, okay, we're putting in, it puts real deep areas, and then elsewhere there's hardly anything. Okay, or they'll come in and do something like this, and then before you can see it, it's quite grimy in this area. But you don't, you want it nice and light. Okay, so we're just gonna popping around all these areas and just generally taking our time and building up. Okay, now you might notice as well, up around these areas here, we haven't gone around and corrected the mistakes. That's because with any luck, we're gonna grind them in. So just down on this side bit, we're putting in a little bit more because we're thinking access areas, panels, things are getting in. And now we're just gonna generally work this type of approach. So we're running out on the brush, so we're going to come up on here. Okay, just wear it all down and just to grime it in and everything else like that. Probably a little bit heavy just down this area down here, but generally I think it's okay. All right, so we just load up off the brush and we'll start on the other side now. Okay. Usual thing to start with, very light passes and build up that edge, and just trying to keep 90 degrees to all the facets or all these angles all over the tumbler, which, let's face it, there is lots. Okay, and the idea with this, it's just going to give us our run in grimy type of look. Okay, some areas down here, these grills, we're going to take care of them as a separate. Okay, and all we're going to do is I'm just going to carry on this right the way over. Now at some point I might change colour and come back in with perhaps something like the original colour, alright, and pop back in with that, literally just to give tonal changes and just vary things, because obviously we changed the colour when we went right the way over it and everything else like that. The other thing as well with the grey, we're going to do things like wheels, which I know sounds a little bit odd, but it's just to lighten them up. So when you've hardly got anything on your brush, you can get in there and do these wheels, which will just highlight all the good stuff. Okay, so if I show you a before and after, hopefully you can see you actually get quite a difference from them. All right, and everything else like that. So I'm going to go around now and completely dry brush everything on this one. As I said, it's a little bit of a long drawn out process and everything else, but say stick with it, don't try and rush it. As soon as you rush it, you're going to end up going slightly over the top, and when you go over the top, it's really hard to come back from it. Okay, so we're being around this one, and you might see at the moment we've got various silver bits. Okay, put on. We've got various bits down the back here, the springs. What we're doing is all the metal colours. Obviously we're going to have the wash going to go on next. It just adds that little bit of depth, and if you can get the black wash to sort of flow into the cracks, it'll sharpen up any joins you have, and obviously it's quite softly moulded on this, so it's one of those areas. We've done the exhaust systems up here as well. We've just done that in sort of a dark metal colour. So what we're doing is all these activators, which do all the push rods and the control surfaces for all these aerofoils, are in a sort of goldy colour. So what we've got down here is a little bit of the old buffable Mr. Metal colour. Okay, this is the number 219. Okay, and it is gorgeous stuff to work with because you can hand paint this or you can brush paint it. Okay, so this is the great thing. Normally with traditional metallics, they don't like to be brush painted, but this one actually likes it a lot. And the great thing with it as well is you can buff it with a brush, which means if you can change the luster. Up here, to be honest, we want these to be quite, you know, say quite muted. Don't want them to be just shiny gold colour or shiny brass colour. But the suspension ones down the back here, we've actually gone around, and with this exhaust as well, it's going to have other colours on there just to buff it all up to make it look like suspension travel is occurring on this. So what we can do now is just do these end veins that come off the back. The other thing as well with these metal colour paints, they cover absolutely gorgeously, so they have no problem, and the capillary action does tend to keep them quite localised. You know, they don't tend to just go everywhere. But there we go, that's those done. So let's pop the lid on this stuff. This is the other thing, don't leave the lid off because it does evaporate. You can rehydrate it obviously, but we don't want to do that. So here we go, this is what we've got now. So we got this dry brushed in there and everything else, starting the weathering process. Got these silver bits, we've done the gold for these sort of push rods down at the front here, okay? And then we've got, obviously working our way around, you can see all the different areas. Plenty to do around the back, to be honest. We just got a blob in the back there for the moment. We're going to put a wash into there and let the capillary action take care of all the rest of it. But we've dry brushed around the back here. As I say, when the tyres are on, you can't see much of this at all, all right? But for the moment, that's those in. So that's looking well. We've also done, as you can see down here, we've done the front. So I have this gold area down at the front, so we've done that one. The hubs as well, just had basically a very quick dry brush. So what we can do now is actually pop down an oil wash onto this one. Now, as I say, traditionally I might use the clay wash, but because you're not going to be able to get in all the areas, it's quite difficult to do it. So I'd say normally I would just pop in here with like a dark dirt or a brown wash or a black wash down into this one. But as I said, I'm not going to be able to get in, so we're going to use the wash for the lower areas afterwards. For the moment, we need sort of a pin wash on the top. So the cheapest and easiest way to do it, because trust me, it lasts forever, I'll use a turpentine. So I must admit, we got some the odorless particular one, turpentine here, and a bit of oil paint, which is actually ivory black. I think any black would do. I wouldn't worry about it too much. But basically all we're going to do is grab a little bit of this. You could use obviously normal enamel thinners. I prefer to use terps if I'm given the option, purely because I just think it goes a little bit better, doesn't dry quite as quick. Okay. The only trouble to it is if you don't have the odorless type, it does smell a bit, but then to be honest, this smells too. So as you can see, you don't use much. We're going to give it quite a heavy wash, so we're going to use there. So we've got a slither off of it, pop it down into our mix. Just give it a damn good mix now. Takes a little bit to break down. It doesn't break down immediately, so it is going to take a little bit of work just to break it down. Okay. But the thing is that I like about these little shot glasses is you can see what's going on. You can tip it on its side and make sure you haven't got any bits, because that's what you don't want. And you want to keep mixing it until you have no bits on the side, because obviously if you get a sort of a grain on there, it will bleed then, and you're going to end up with a darker spot. A couple of things to remember. Obviously, if you've never used oils before, have a look at my other videos. There's tons on it. Have a look at the Sherman one. That'll cover this in detail a lot more, okay? But generally, when you're working with oils, just don't think what you're seeing is what you're going to get. I know a lot of it is, and the great thing with using the clay wash, literally, it is a WYSIWYG product. What you see is what you're going to get, okay? With the oils, they tend to dry over time and fade back. So if it's looking far too strong and you're a little bit worried about it, I wouldn't worry too much, because give it some time, it will all fade back. So you can always do a test area, so we can use the bottom. The idea with this, it has great capillary action, so when you brush it over things, you might see it just goes over the top and sort of bleeds in. And this is the great thing about using the oils, all right, and it sort of bleeds around, and this is the type of effect we want. A couple of things to remember. If you're going to be using oils, I recommend using them over a satin finish or a flat to give it a better faded effect. If you use it over a gloss, obviously it holds itself, it has trouble breaking the surface tension and everything else like that, okay, where obviously this won't. You can dab afterwards. So we're just doing it roughly there, and you can do some quite interesting weather effects. But the idea of using oils, they are great because they have a fantastic capillary action and they'll go off and run everywhere. So little things, you can do heavy amounts. We're just going to do it down here in this oil filler areas. You can put them quite localized in there, but at the end of the day, you know, we're going to be using this pretty much everywhere. So we're going to use it a little bit like a pin wash. I'm going to go in some heavy areas to start with. So we're just going to go in here, and then we're just going to pop it around and let the capillary action do a lot of the work. Okay, now this front area is quite grimy, so what we're going to do is brush it over this entire front edge, and then we're going to let it all fade back. So just smooth it round to take it round very gently. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to flip it over, and we'll just do this entire side for the moment. And obviously it's going to act a bit like a filter because it's going to dry down. This gap, we've got quite a large gap down here. We're going to put quite a bit in there, then the rest of it we're just going to smooth over. Okay, this guy down in here. We can put this over. Getting a bit heavier now, we're coming towards the bottom, because obviously it's going to be more dirty, but we can really start to grime a lot of this up now. So I'll put a little bit more in there, then we're just going to smooth it around, taking it around. And as I say, it does look dark, but it is going to dry back quite heavily afterwards. So we've got quite a dark shadowy area, so we're going to put a little bit more down in there. Then we're just going to come over the top. Okay, just going to brush this down on and put it everywhere, and as you can see, it's darkening it down, acting like a filter. This grill system, we want quite a bit in there, so we're going to put in quite a good generous amount, and then we will literally let it sit. And we might need 2 or 3 coats in grills and stuff like that. Just try and keep it even. Okay, and then the rest of it we're just going to smooth over. Okay, then just down these areas. All these lower ones, because it's quite grimy down here. And all those areas like that. Okay, and empty over it. Okay, so you can see it's looking what I call pretty good down there. It's all pretty grimy and dirt and everything else. Then obviously you can do is come along. Normally you'd use a clean bit, but you can use just a little bit of kitchen roll, put it up into a nice wad, okay, and you can actually brush over it and pull it down and smooth this out. And this is just going to blend it all around now and take it down a level. Okay, and you can just sort of work it in to the various areas, just to, as I say, stain in, draw it down, and all those areas. So we've got a nice sort of grimy type of thing going on there. Obviously we're not going to touch the grill, but what you can do, grabbing some cotton buds, if you find it's too strong, you can take it back off. Okay, now this isn't an exact science. Don't think you're using the clay wash now, where you just rub it on, rub it off, doesn't matter. This does, because when it's in, it stains. Okay, so all you do, take a cotton bud. Okay, so in here, you just give it a rub round. It'll rehydrate the actual stuff, and then you can rub it in, and you can thin it down, take it out, draw it out with a cotton bud, all those areas. Okay, rehydrate and rub away, just to give you a more muted type of thing. Let's say avoid metallizer areas where you've been with that. Okay, but this is just blending, it's blending it all through. Okay, and you're not gonna, don't worry about your paint work, because it will be totally safe, because you're using an enamel based or product with an acrylic, okay, or a lacquer based product, so it shouldn't affect too much. So also you want to keep it a little bit more down there, but you're never rubbing this off. All you're doing is physically blending this in, okay, which will give you a very natural worn look to things. And remember, it is going to dry back off. Okay, so just for your argument's sake, that's that section done now, just like that, and compare it with the other side. So you've got quite clean, grimed in. All right, and then down here, for instance, you've got with where we've still got it in there compared with how we've rubbed it off, and obviously you've still got your cloth, and you can buff and polish and blend and all those good things like that. Okay, so don't panic too much about it. If you want to do sort of streakiness and stains, just rub it downwards like that, and there we go. That's the type of effect we're going for right the way over. So we've got it nicely in the grooves, it's still contained, but other areas we've sort of just tarnished it down and brought it down. There's things we can do with pigments as well, which is very similar to this, which will go in afterwards. But first of all, what we want to do is really weather this one down. So we go from a nice sort of worn look here to this clean stuff on the top, and that's all we're trying to do, is weather the paint down, grime it down and give it natural texture. Okay, now this works two ways. If you wanted to make highlights, okay, and lighten the paintwork, just do it with a whitewash, okay, and that will lighten it naturally up and things like that. But this is a light colour anyway, so we're just trying to darken down for the moment. So I'm going to carry on now and put it right the way over the entire thing, just it's over. Then I'm going to give it a couple of hours to start to dry, okay, so once it's dry, it'll be handleable again and everything else like that. You could then put another flat coat over the top to seal it down before you come in with your next weathering, because what we're going to do is going to use pigments to cause grime and streaking down the sides of it, a little bit of clay wash around the bottom end to give it that sort of nice sort of road grime and everything else like it. But there we go, working quite well, really coming the part now, looking the part anyway. Okay, so there we go, looking very much the part now, very nicely weathered in. Obviously still haven't fixed the front gear, so we're just on really for a show to see what it's like. But hopefully you can see now, we've got that sort of nice, worn down, weathered look to it all. And the thing is with all washes, what they should do is blend colours together. So i.e. when you've got things like camo work, it shouldn't look like an afterthought on there, it should be part of it. And this happens with naturally with weathering in of paintwork. So like the real thing, if it had just been painted and the camo work just done, you are going to see big discrepancies between the tone, the texture, just generally the look between the two colours of paint. Once they've weathered in, bleached in, things like that, it just becomes universal. So when you look across it, it all looks the same. But this was what we're trying to do with a wash. By using the oil wash, we can stain and grime and get it all around there without the risk of getting big bits of clay stuck in between all these panels and in different areas, things like that. So there we go, that's it looking pretty much done just like that. Really happy how it turned out. So what we're going to do now is going to put a flat coat right the way over everything. The whole point of that is to seal this down now. It's had a couple of hours to dry and go off all the oils, no problem at all. So what we can do is seal all those in. Also we're going to flat the tyres. We're going to give them a nice big heavy flat coat to really sort of seal everything down. So when we come in with hopefully in a moment with pigments, different things like that, we can still use oils, you can still use, you know, obviously pigment fixers to put more weathering on, but that lot's all protected now. That's it, we're done with that stage, we're happy with it. Seal it, protect it, move on to the next one. Okay, so over in the spray bay, as you can see, we have Tumbler down here. So for this particular one, we're going to be using the matte acrylic varnish, purely because it gives a nice sealed down flat look to everything, and also it dries really, really quickly. Sometimes I like to use the polyurethane one, but for this type of work I prefer to use this one, purely because it gives you instant results without having to wait around too long. So what we're going to do is just going to put this into the colour cup. Having a little bit of a hard time getting that through because I don't want to squirt it through, because obviously there must be a lump in here. You can see it's quite thick at the end. What I'm going to do is just going to bypass it and pour it neat into the colour cup. Now we're not going to need gallons because we're going to do a nice big dusty coat. Okay, and then hopefully you'll see as we go over it will change the tone. Totally flattens it down. Alright, so what we're going to do now is just carry that right the way over everything, going around the tyres. Just taking your time. But just remember your distance. Distance is what makes your flat coat work. If you're not in the right position, what's going to happen is you're going to make a bit of a mess. And there's a good thing about this one just going to happen here. You might notice we've got some, it's looking very white. Okay, that's because it's quite thick and it's giving a white sort of chalky reference to this. Technically we don't want it to be that flat, alright? So what we're going to do is just going to mix it with some thinners. So just going to put a 50-50 mix of thinners into this one. Okay, let's put that in. And then what will happen is this will give more of a satin look now. So we just blow that through. Okay, and then you go back over the tyres and over those things. Hopefully now it will go slightly darker and more of a satin finish. And that's more the look we want. We don't want it to be totally dead flat and having that white chalky look to it. And that's what happens when you're trying to get it a little too flat too quick. Okay, so we're just going right the way over. Just going to turn this on. we go, that's flattened down now. So what you can do is, just because we want to put a little bit of luster down into the tyres, okay, we're just going to come in with a little bit of clear. Alright, so we've just got clear gloss now, and we're just going to overcoat around the wheels, just to re-shine them up a bit. I'm just going to pop a little light coat right the way over everything. And all this is doing is it's going to still have a flat texture to it, but it's going to get rid of some of that whiteness that we put on there, which was a little bit too heavy because the flat was too thick. Okay, but as long as you don't flood it and you keep it nice and light, you should be fine with it. Okay. Those tyres. So this way you get the best of both worlds. You get a flat coat without the whiteness. Okay, right the way over. Just keep coating the tyres. But you definitely don't want to make it wet, because as soon as it's wet, you're going to have a glossy finish, and that's not what you want at all. So just keeping the high air pressure, just drying this down. And just dry it off. I'll just dry these wheels off there, you can see what we've done. So if you look at the tyre, you can see it's nice and black, no problem at all. We haven't got any of that glossiness there, and we've lost all of that white. Okay, so if you do get the white, don't panic too much. You should be absolutely fine with it. So there we go. We let that one dry, give it around about sort of 20 minutes just to dry off, and we can carry on.